In today's episode, guys, we're going to be talking about strength and conditioning for hockey goalkeepers, super specific area and an area that hasn't really had a huge amount of coverage on it. So I just want to give some key concepts around what you need to be focusing on, what a goalkeeper needs, and what a specific session would look like from a strength training and conditioning perspective. So if we begin by thinking about the overall impact, there's kind of two core areas. Strength training itself is going to increase endurance and power. And goalies who strength train are going to be more explosive, going to be faster, going to be more athletic. Some of the best goalkeepers in the world regularly strength train, and because of that are quicker off the line, they're more explosive, they're better at saves, they can get on and off the ground faster, they can recover faster. They also have better endurance to be able to survive a full tournament without fatiguing, and in a position like goalkeeper, as like a goalkeeper where you're going to have a huge amount of pressure put on you, and where your fatigue is obviously going to make a big impact on match outcomes. It's really important you can have that endurance underlying everything that you do. Secondly, agility training is going to improve your reaction times as well. So you've got two elements. You've got the explosive abilities, you've got strength training and power, and then you've got agility, being mobile, being able to get on and off the ground quickly, having good mobility as the second kind of key factor there. So if you can have these two areas as your core focus, that's kind of the key thing from a strength and conditioning perspective, and also the area where strength and conditioning can have a really big impact. Overarching all of these areas, though, is injury prevention, and goalkeepers have got a couple of key areas which other positions don't get quite as many injuries in. One of those is the shoulder, and one of those is the hip and groin to a greater extent than the playing positions, and that's because of having to get on and off the ground, outstretched position for saves, often landing on in compromised shoulder positions and compromised hip positions can put the hip and knee and the shoulder at greater risk. So these are kind of a couple of areas we need to focus on. And one other one would be the neck, because the ball obviously sometimes hits the helmet. From a concussion prevention perspective, having a strong neck is also another important aspect of strength and conditioning for goalkeepers too. But these are the two main ways in which we can impact goalkeepers' performance and also improve performance too. So there's four kind of main concepts which we need to look at. Those are 1, be explosive; 2, train heavy; 3, get on and off the ground quick; and 4 is condition for repeat efforts. These are kind of like the four main concepts within a goalkeeper's program. So the first is to be as explosive as you can. You need to train to be able to accelerate quick, to jump high, and produce lots of power. Those are the three core things from an explosive perspective. Think about being able to save quickly, close down space, being able to react and save shots into the kind of far corners. All of those are underpinned by the ability to produce power. And power is essentially the ability to express force in a short amount of time over big distances. So if you can save goals really athletically, get off the line quickly, accelerate fast, that's really key. From a lift heavy perspective, you'll lift heavier weights, which is going to help to develop power, because power is underpinned by ability to express force and being as explosive as possible. So heavy strength training should be a bedrock of effective goalkeeper programs, more so than outfield players, because there's more of a demand placed on being explosive and powerful, more so than being able to run for prolonged periods of time, be able to do those repeat sprint efforts. Thirdly is get on and off the ground quickly. Mobility training and agility work is vital for this, to be able to be effective on and off the ground and to be agile. And without that, you're going to struggle to be able to be effective. Lastly then, conditioning for repeat efforts. Bike conditioning is what I would generally recommend for this, and using repeat sprint efforts and conditioning the body to be able to be explosive and recover fast is the core focus. So rather than an outfield player who might need to cover, say, 5 to 9 kilometers worth of running, sometimes higher within a game, perform lots of high speed running, and have other injury prevention considerations. Slightly different for a goalkeeper, just because it's much more based around short, explosive power and being able to repeat that quickly and sustain that for a multi-day tournament as well at the high level. So these are kind of four main concepts. 3 key areas then to have in any strength training program are going to be plyometrics, and that's going to help you to be more explosive, essentially, to train the tendons to be elastic and to be able to recycle and basically accelerate the body as quick as possible over things like accelerations and saves. Heavy lifts are getting really strong in things like squats, deadlifts, and cleans to produce lots of force, because that again is going to underpin your ability to be explosive. And then lastly, robustness to keep yourself injury free, and particularly things like the hips, groin, ankle, shoulders, which are going to get loaded quite a bit and are at risk for a goalkeeper. You've got to make sure you include that in the strength training program as well. So I'm going to give you 2 example sessions now. One's going to be a strength training session. One's going to be a conditioning session. I'm just going to give you a bit of a background and rationale about why I've put it together the way that I have. So from a strength training perspective, always start off with movement prep. So we're preparing the body for what's coming up next. So we're probably going to include quite a big hip focus for a goalkeeper, but it depends on the nature of the session. And you may also want to include some shoulder, thoracic mobility, some ankle prep, whatever is the focus of the session. And obviously on an ongoing basis, all of those areas are going to be important anyway. Try to include some kind of plyometric based movements, because we've said already, being able to be explosive and be able to produce force in a very short time span is vital. So you've got to be including plyometrics as well. Things like a drop jump to a box or a lateral bound, including that lateral component is so key. And plyometrics can generally be more specific to the demands of a playing position and to a movement than strength training, which is generally a more general training outcome. So those would be good options, but just obviously be mindful of the level at which you're at. If you're just starting out, then I would definitely not recommend doing high-level plyometrics. This is something which you would build up to, and there are much more rudimentary variations of this, but this is just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that you might include in a session. And this is obviously going to depend on how much time you have available to you. You might have more time available, in which case you could add in more. From a max strength perspective, I'd include a couple of kind of core lifts. Back squat would be one, or alternatively something like a trap bar deadlift would be a good option instead. Something like a Romanian deadlift is another max strength exercise, trying to increase the amount of force you can produce through the posterior chain, and that's going to cross over to accelerations and saves, for example. Lastly, then you want to have some element of robustness, particularly around the shoulder, something like a lateral raise to external rotation to develop the strength of the rotator cuff, which is going to help with prevention of things like subluxations and dislocations of the shoulder when you're landing in compromised positions, as well as just being strong in external rotation, which is involved in reaching. It's going to be really key. And then the groin is an at-risk area again. So things like long lever Copenhagen holds, really good for developing capacity of the adductors to withstand loading and to resist hip abduction. And then finally, some sort of trunk circuit is a good option there, because again, just developing postural control, lower back injury prevention, and just generally good kinetic chain sequencing through the whole body. And that is kind of really key from a trunk perspective too. So that would be an example of what a goalkeeper strength training program would look like. From a conditioning perspective, again, it massively depends on what the outcome is you're trying to achieve here. So this isn't just what every goalkeeper should be doing. It might be that some goalkeepers are doing much longer intervals, or they might be doing a different modality altogether. They might be doing running instead of doing bike conditioning. But I would generally recommend something like bike conditioning, just because of the kind of crossover to the time of duration you need to work for, the amount of kind of power you need to produce. It works pretty well for the kind of conditioning demands. Before you do main conditioning block though, movement prep again, some kind of pulse raising activity early on to build up to like a 7 out of 10 RPE, so like a 70% effort by the end of the 5 minutes. So you've kind of prepared the body for the intensities you're about to achieve. Again, a big hip focus before you're going into your main session, just to make sure consistently working on your mobility. And then from a conditioning perspective, this is what an example session could look like. Something like 5 seconds at max effort, followed by a 30-second recovery, 8 repetitions in total. So that would be 40 seconds of total work. So it'd be 5 times 8. And you take 4 minutes recovery and then perform another 8 repetitions. So that would be 16 efforts of 5-second max effort, which is a really tough session. But it does prepare the body for, the periods in the game where you're going to have to do multiple efforts, multiple really, really high intensity efforts. And if you can recover, then that's going to be really effective, and you can recover between efforts really, really effectively. That's massively important from a goalkeeper perspective. So you don't need to be doing long intervals necessarily, unless that's a real limiter on your ability to perform. So if you're aerobically kind of way off and you've done something like a 5-minute bike time trial would be an effective way of kind of assessing that. it may be that you do longer interval work, sort of 2, 3, 4 minute intervals, maybe, if that's an effort you need to kind of focus on. But if that's not a limiter and you just need to improve your ability to repeat power, then that would be a really good alternative. Obviously, the cool down there, I've just missed out what should be in that, which is, again, just a kind of continuation of what we were looking at before from a movement prep perspective, just in reverse. So some cool down work on the bike, followed by some static stretching. That would be a really, really effective way to prepare as well and to recover post session. So that gives you a good idea of some basic principles for goalkeepers and gives you some example sessions that you could put together here. If you want any more advice on that, just drop me a message below. But I hope that's been useful, and do subscribe if you've enjoyed it.